Regulus Corneas. Regulus Corneas was a sin archbishop of the witch cult, representing greed. He debuted in the second interlude of Arc 3 alongside Kaioshin, where he took on Crush's military convoy, completely decimating it alongside its passengers, which included Rem. Later, he appeared in Emilia's first trial during the events of Arc 4 where he acted as one of two antagonists alongside Pandora, and finally, Regulus played the role of one of the primary antagonists of Arc 5 where he was subsequently defeated by a joint force consisting of Reinhard van Astria, Natsuki Subaru, and Emilia. He drowned underneath the streets of the Watergate city of Priestella. As the strongest and one of the oldest sin archbishops in the witch cult, Regulus had an air of mystery surrounding him and was responsible for many brutal mass slaughters and annihilations in the century prior to the beginning of the story. During the events of the Fourth Arcade, it was revealed he acted as the head of the radical faction inside the witch cult until 100 years ago. More than 100 years ago, Regulus used to live with his family. His father was an alcoholic yet tried to be a good father, his mother complained about bad earnings but apologized for it occasionally, and his two brothers who were sometimes mean to him but gave him their share of their meal if he accidentally spilled his. At an unspecified point in his life, Regulus was chosen as a sin archbishop and obtained the witch factor of greed, and, in accordance to his deepest desires, developed the overpowered authority of greed, which he used in the following century of his life. Regulus subsequently killed his entire family, then the villagers who looked down on him, followed by the people from the nearby town who pushed his family into such peril, and then finally the inept heads of the country who carelessly abandoned Regulus' village and that nearby town he had already slaughtered. He broke his childhood love's mind, slaughtered her family and forced her to marry him, thus forcing her to become his first of many wives. Only after having committed such atrocities did Regulus finally see a way to live, free of all worries, not needing anything as he considered himself satisfied as he was. At some point in the past, Regulus got hold of a small black box, similar to the one Betelgeuse had. It is unknown if it's the exact same box or a different one, however, Regulus did know what was inside of it when Betelgeuse showed it to him during the events of the Attire forest battle, suggesting the box Regulus once held, contained either the witch factor of greed or sloth. In the following years, Regulus became the sin archbishop of greed, joining the witch cult where he became the leader of the radical faction. Familiarizing himself with the doctrine of the cult and its members, Regulus met Betelgeuse Romani Conti, the leader of the now-forgotten moderate faction. It's safe to assume the two didn't harbor a friendly relationship although they occasionally cooperated along with the other sin archbishops. Just like other high-ranking members of the witch cult took care of their own eccentric goals, Regulus spent his free time carefully and meticulously search of beautiful women he'd forcefully marry and spend his days with, before eventually watching them die, be it from natural or unnatural causes, more often than not being the one who delivered their deaths. Roughly 100 years before the events of the main story, Regulus participated in the attack of the elven village in Attire forest along with Pandora, cooperating with her to collect the elf Fortuna as his 79th wife. With the pair revealing their malicious intentions, Betelgeuse, who was helping the elves in the forest, ordered Fortuna to run with her niece Emilia. Regulus then proceeded to have a one-sided battle with Betelgeuse Romani Conti who just took in the witch factor of sloth, cutting Betelgeuse's right arm off and severely wounding and ruining his legs by throwing dirt at him, in a relatively short notice. Just before he was about to deal the finishing blow by smashing Betelgeuse's head open, Fortuna interrupted him, which greatly angered him. When Pandora calmly asked him to spare Betelgeuse's life, he lashed back at her, throwing dirt at her, killing her instantly. Soon after, Pandora used her authority of vainglory to erase her death from ever happening and proceeded to remove Regulus's presence from the forest and sent him back to his mansion, which reverted the damage he had dealt to Betelgeuse and Attire forest. 15 years before Subaru's arrival, Regulus single-handedly took down a heavily fortified Valachian city of Garkla, housing thousands of soldiers and the Valachian hero Kurgan. Rumor has it that at the time, a meteor supposedly belonging to one of the 6 witches was located in the city itself. It is confirmed the meteor did not belong to the Witch of Envy. It is not known if the meteor was actually present or if it was only an excuse to drive the witch cult to take action. Appearance. At first glance, anyone would consider Regulus to be an utterly unremarkable individual. His face had no notable features and he had golden eyes that were usually murky and disinterested but started to sparkle when he passionately engaged in his long monologues. His modestly handsome face wasn't particularly attractive or unattractive and his height and build were both utterly average. As one would expect, his hair also didn't particularly stand out as it was neither short nor long and without a distinct style. However, it was naturally white despite his youthful appearance. Regulus' white skin that lacked any semblance of a tan, coupled with his white hair and predominantly white clothing, made him seem as though he was the epitome of the color white. In fact, the complete devoid of color exhibited by Regulus' physical appearance gave him the impression of a sickly person of which all color had drained away. Overall, in contradiction to his personality and actions, Regulus Corneas looked like a completely ordinary man who could easily melt into a crowd in spite of his lack of color. Regulus' attire, much like his facial features and body shape, was neither extravagant or shabby, instead portraying an impression of averageness. His primary piece of clothing was a pure white Greca-style overcoat that reached down to his ankles and had golden-edged cuffs, a set of 5 golden buttons running down the torso of his center front that usually ensured that the coat was closed above the hip line, and golden highlighted edging. The inside of the coat was black and featured vertical golden stripes traveling down the entire coat. The most striking part of his coat was the opulent gold and black high-necked collar it sported that had the symbol for infinity inscribed on it, perhaps reflecting the nature of Regulus' authority. Under his coat, he wore a long-sleeved deep blue-colored dress shirt, white snow-white trousers, and a pair of white shoes, the latter two of which were both the same shade as his hair and overcoat. Usually, only the cuffs of the dress shirt could be seen as Regulus's long overcoat tended to obscure it almost completely. Regulus had a single deep blue teardrop-shaped earring that was the same color as his dress shirt and dangled from his right earlobe thanks to a thin gold chain attaching it. During his wedding with Amelia in Arc 5, Regulus made his appearance in a more formal wedding suit. He was wearing a white tuxedo with a long back that went down almost to his heels, a blue and white striped shirt with a black and gold striped ribbon, white gloves and white shoes. The tuxedo's color palette was the same as his normal suit. Personality. Regulus was talkative, and tended to describe himself as unselfish, despite representing greed. He would often go on and on about trivial matters in the most incoherent ways, usually leaving the other party confused and/or unable to follow his thoughts, ideals and values. Due to his extremely prideful personality, however, he often forced his own selfishness on others and tried to justify it. If his opponents had said something that went against his opinions and beliefs, he would find unreasonable faults in them, gradually becoming angry while accusing them of violating his rights, before attacking and killing them without mercy or second thought. Despite his pacifistic nature, he would not hesitate to attack, harm or kill someone. As to him, the act of taking away what is his was the most abhorrent and disgusting thing a person could do. He often showed complete ignorance for other individuals' values and exercised extremely selfish behaviors, as seen when he got unreasonably angry at Rem who had prepared to fight him, despite explicitly telling her that he hates fighting, despite slaughtering multiple convoys full of wounded people just minutes prior to Rem's battle with him and Kaioshin. On top of all that, Regulus was also very hypocritical and wouldn't hesitate to eat his own words and promises, giving further evidence of his sociopathic nature. He was extremely prideful and viewed himself as a divine being or the most satisfying existence in the world, which greatly hindered his assessment of people, no matter if they were his enemies or allies, to the point he would make light of the sword saint, mocking him and calling him a moniker of some guy who knows of nothing but swinging a sword. His hot-tempered personality often resulted in unneeded fights. However, due to his overwhelmingly powerful authority of greed, he always came out victorious and unharmed, even against ridiculously strong opponents such as the Wallachia strongest, Kurgan. Due to his long life as a Sin Archbishop without ever getting his life seriously threatened, he never matured. He disclosed his secret to Subaru, who in turn was able to connect all the dots and unravel his formidable authority, allowing Reinhard to deal the finishing blow. In his final moments, Regulus revealed how he hated being looked down upon or laughed at, going even as far as saying he became a Sin Archbishop just so he could protect himself from such people. Whoever offended him or his wives would wound up getting killed, no matter their acquaintanceship with him. Regulus never realized his sins, not even in the moments before his demise. His view on the world was corrupt and distorted from the very beginning until the bitter end. His final cries were full of hatred, wishing for the whole of humanity to disappear forever. Having been born with a corrupt and distorted mindset, Regulus seemingly did not perceive kindness, love and affection in the same way as a normal person would have. It was strongly suggested that he lacked empathy and was impulsive, narcissistic and sociopathic. Abilities. Authority of greed. Goyoku no Ken no Regulus was able to use the authority of greed until his witch factors were taken by Natsuki Subaru following his death. The authority itself is split into two main abilities: stillness of an object's time and lion's heart. Stillness of an object's time, but tai no jiken no seishi. The so-called stillness of an object's time was Regulus' mainly offensive ability, named by Subaru. Regulus could stop the time of anything he was wearing, touching, or even his breath, which in turn stopped the object's or thing's interference from the outside world, only allowing its interference outwards and even granting Regulus the ability to freely manipulate the object's shape. Small objects imbued with stillness of an object's time could be used either as a form of platform which allowed Regulus to freely traverse on it, or be utilized as objects of imminent death and destruction as they created devastating and destructive attacks when used with malicious intent. Dirt, sand and pebbles imbued with stillness of an object's time, Regulus frequently showed the ability to pick up or kick things like dirt or sand, stopping their time and throwing them towards his enemies. As the time of these small objects was stopped, the objects effectively acted as anomalies in the world, being cut off from the flow of time. They passed through anything they collided with, no matter the sturdiness, leaving behind only small holes if the structure was still left standing in the first place. If thrown at an individual or an animal, the objects would naturally travel through them, completely shredding and goring them, usually leaving behind nothing more than an unrecognizable pile of flesh or a bloody mist. Regulus used this ability to shred Pandora into a bloody mist during the attack on Attire Forest, roughly 1 century before the start of the main story. He used the same attack once more during the events of Arc 5, when he shredded Subaru's right leg, as a form of revenge for Subaru spoiling his plans and mood. Water imbued with stillness of an object's time, though not very practical in most fights, Regulus did resort to using water, if he had the chance to do so. The ways of attacking were pretty much the same, as Regulus usually just scooped up a fistful of water and threw it towards his enemies, rendering them to nothingness. However, after being forced to engage in combat with the Sword Saint, Regulus was forced to get a bit more creative. By kicking the water in a water canal, he unleashed a devastating tsunami, hurling towards Subaru and Emilia during their escape. The tidal wave crushed everything in its path and did not stop until Reinhard cut it in half, destroying it in the process. By freezing the water from a nearby water canal in place, Regulus could pick it up with his hands, similarly to having a tatami mat made out of water. He manipulated it in a similar way as he manipulated the aforementioned water from a nearby canal, creating a giant tsunami. If needed, Regulus was also shown to be able to walk on frozen water droplets, as if he was walking on solid ground. Furthermore, by just stepping into the water, Regulus created a pillar of water with its time stopped, using it to propel himself high in the air. There was even a time when he collected the water from an entire nearby water canal, shaped it into a giant blob of water, jumped, according to Subaru, the jump itself was more akin to teleportation, onto the third control tower in the water gate city of Pristella, reshaped it into thousands of smaller droplets and proceeded to bomb the entire district underneath him, while referring to the ongoing bombardment as purification rain. Wind imbued with stillness of an object's time. One of Regulus' most recognizable and commonly used attacks are him stopping the time of air produced by himself. With a simple swipe of his hand, he produced a vortex of wind, traveling in a straight line following his arm. By stopping its time, the wind would not dissipate but instead, turn into an invisible blade of wind, cutting everything in its path. By utilizing this attack, Regulus disarmed both Crush and Betelgeuse on 2 separate occasions in the main story. He was also shown to imbue shockwaves created by him with stillness of an object's time, creating unstoppable explosions, shattering everything in its path, as seen when he blew up the first dragon carriage in the second interlude of Arc 3. Perhaps one of his deadliest attacks, however, was his breathe with its time stopped. By simply exhaling and stopping the time of his exhaled air, Regulus would effectively create invisible pockets of air that would shred everything in its path. He utilized this attack when fighting against Reinhard, completely shredding the Sword Saint's left leg and making it almost impossible to approach the Sin Archbishop without randomly falling victim to one of his deadly traps. People imbued with stillness of an object's time, despite this ability seemingly working only on objects, Regulus actually displayed multiple cases of using it on himself or on other people. By making physical contact with people and imbuing them with stillness of an object's time, he would cut them off from the normal flow of time, effectively making them invincible for as long as he wanted to. He was first shown using it in this form with Emilia in Arc 5, when he saved her from serious flames that would surely scorch her to ash. Later on in the same arc, Regulus used stillness of an object's time 2 times on Reinhard. The first time he used it, Reinhard was sent flying through different houses and 3 thick ice walls without ever so slightly changing his speed, only coming to a stop when he collided with another one of Regulus' attacks imbued with stillness of an object's time. The second time he used it on Reinhard, however, the sword saint was thrown directly onto the very moon. Reinhard later noted that even he would have been in trouble if he hadn't landed on the moon. Having said that, the most common application of this power could be observed with Regulus himself, as he frequently imbued his own body with stillness of an object's time, making it so everything he came in contact with would automatically get rejected by his body. When a spear was thrown at him, the shaft that hit him completely vanished, and when, during his long duel with Reinhard, he used this ability on himself, Reinhard remarked it suddenly felt impossible to touch him. Perhaps the only downside to using stillness of an object's time on himself was the fact that if Regulus didn't freeze the time of an object he was standing on, be it the floor of a building or the very earth he was walking on, Regulus would simply cave through it. In case he refused to stop the time of the earth around him, he would have fallen through the entire planet. Manipulation of objects with the usage of stillness of an object's time. As mentioned above, Regulus was easily able to manipulate some objects if he wanted to, though he rarely used this ability, nor was it ever accurately described in a novelization. He was capable of freezing water droplets in place, creating some sort of a path for him to walk over. On one occasion, he also propelled himself in the air by creating a pillar of water with its time stopped, simply by making contact with a nearby body of water. Perhaps the most bizarre application of this ability, however, happens during Regulus and Subaru's chase throughout the part of the city. As Subaru started utilizing nearby houses as cover and parkoured his way through them, Regulus somehow managed to manipulate entire floors, kicking out roughly a meter worth of the ground floor and causing the entire building to collapse. He was also capable of roughly changing the layout of the building, distorting its walls and foundations, causing it to collapse. According to Subaru, the walls and stairs of a particular house were unnatural. During this event, Regulus is described as playing with a Rubik's Cube. Lion's Heart, Shirshir no Shinzo. Lion's Heart. Regulus' purely defensive ability allowed him to freeze his heart's time, stopping his heartbeat and granting himself a temporary state of invincibility. While this power was active, Regulus was completely cut off from the world's flow of time, literally becoming a walking anomaly. He did not have any need for eating, drinking, or even breathing, and his body did not age a single second, nor did it perform even the most basic of human body functions such as sweating or excreting bodily wastes. He could even ignore every physical law he wished, traveling at inhuman speeds, making it seem like he's teleporting around the place, ignoring gravity and scaling multi-story buildings by just lightly pushing himself off the ground. According to Reinhard, he did not possess a heartbeat and had a corpse-like body temperature. Lion's Heart acted as his ultimate defensive ability, as it allowed him to simply ignore any and every form of damage dealt to his body, be it sword or magical attacks that could level entire buildings, collisions with dragon carriages that would rip a normal person apart, falling down for hundreds of meters launched towards the ground with extreme speeds, and being frozen deep underwater. He was even capable of brushing off Reinhardt's the swordplay of Astrea family in Crush's one blow, 100 felled sword attacks, as if they were just light gusts of wind, despite both attacks being shown to have been capable of vaporizing people and cutting cleanly through the Hakugiai's thick hide. However, this ability did have a downside to it, in form of a time limit. Whenever Regulus used this ability for more than 5 seconds at a time, he began to experience almost unbearably excruciating pain, which prompted him to quickly deactivate it. If he would continue with the usage of it, without taking pauses, Regulus would die from heart failure. He had noted that he could, in theory, push the limit to around 10 seconds, but the pain and the fear of dying were too much for him to handle. Lion's Heart paired with Regulus' Kingdom, in order to circumvent the handicap given to him in form of the 5-second rule, Regulus gave away his Lion's Heart to the subjects of his kingdom, or in other words, to any woman who he considered to be his wife. By doing so, he would effectively get rid of the timer and the necessity to manually turn the ability on and off, as by merging his heart with his wife's hearts, their heartbeat would keep his ability activated, and it would last until his wife's death. In order to circumvent that potential drawback, Regulus accumulated over 200 wives in his over a century-long life. By doing so, the risk of all his wives dying and being exposed to the strains of Lion's Heart were practically zilch, as no one would ever connect his wives with his authority. Naturally, as the wives' Lion's Heart was only a pseudo-heart, they didn't bear any consequences, let alone were they even aware of harboring it inside of them. The range of the paired-up Lion's Heart is unknown, though according to the author, Regulus' wives had to be close enough for him to feel their love nearby. Lion's heart and stillness of an object's time paired together. After accumulating his kingdom and learning how to use both abilities at the same time, Regulus became invincible in the very essence of the word. By pairing Lion's heart with his wives and keeping them out of harm's reach, Regulus could use Lion's heart for an infinite amount of time, ignore any and every physical rule he wished and mock his enemies to the fullest before annihilating them in one fell swoop. By doing so, Regulus also eliminated the need to circle between both abilities, as he was unable to use both at the same time. Concentrating only on stillness of an object's time, Regulus walked the face of the planet with a permanent invincibility and an insanely powerful ability under his sleeve. As such, Regulus single-handedly destroyed entire cities, killed even the strongest of warriors and became known as the deadliest sin Archbishop of the witch cult. Equipment. Witch Cult's Gospel. As a member of the witch cult, Regulus was the owner of a copy of the witch cult Gospel. Each witch cult Gospel was a replica of the Book of Wisdom, a book that had been in the possession of the Witch of Greed Echidna. The Book of Wisdom would provide exact details of future events concerning the Witch of Greed, essentially bestowing Echidna with a form of precognition. Unlike the original Book of Wisdom, the Gospels of the witch cult were imperfect replicas, meaning that, although they detailed the future of its owner, the events conveyed were subject to change and the information provided was often up for interpretation. The Gospels took the form of small black books that could only be read by their owners.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.